Welcome to the Being Known podcast with my friend, Dr. Kurt Thompson.
And my friend, Pepper Sweeney.
We are here to discover and explore what it means to be truly known. Hello, Kurt. Hey, man, you wrote a book. You wrote a book, and we made a season out of this book.
We did. Yeah,
and,
we did.
I was thinking about just how cool that is. Like you have this amazing work that I really encourage everybody to go out and buy. It's The Soul of Desire, Discovering the Neuroscience of Longing, Beauty, and Community, written by Dr. Kurt Thompson, MD. Run, don't walk. Go get it. And then go back and listen to this season if you haven't. The other thing is we've been putting out on socials these applications every week that after they read the chapter, they can dive into that. It's just really a great package that celebrates this work of yours. And I'm proud and honored to be a part of it.
And well, thanks so much. You're very kind, and unusually so this morning. So thanks for that. See, right? These are things that like women would never say to each other. We would take those kind of shots across the bow. As has been the case for the past two seasons and this season, it has just been a joy to have these conversations with you. And so even the construction of the creation of the podcast itself, it feels like an expression of what we're talking about in the book.
For sure.
And so thank you for partnering with me in that. Thanks to Amy, who's helping to do that, for helping to produce this. So I'm just really, really grateful. And I do hope that people will check it out and will and like the application piece is important, because I think you can spend a lot of time just out in the ether talking about things theoretically, but we really kind of like what we talked about in the last episode in particular, this notion that it's not just a matter of learning new stuff or feeling better about oneself. That like this is intended to change what we are actually doing in bone and blood every day, no matter where, no matter what domain of life we're occupying. And it's just been great to be on the ride with you. It's been great.
Yeah. It's just been awesome. This book starts with the title. It starts with desire, and you recognize that we are a people of longing right from the beginning.
Yeah. And it's funny. I was talking about this with some other folks just yesterday, this notion that, you watch a newborn come into the world, and the newborn is just an embodied bundle of appetites, an embodied bundle of desire, of longing. And they have no hesitation in letting you know that they want things. And apart from the packaging and hopefully the expression of it now, as an adult, maybe some of the time guy, me, it doesn't change. Like I am a bundle of appetites, I'm a bundle of desire. And it's easy for us to just either dismiss that desire or feel like it's going to get me into trouble, or it does get me into trouble. And so I have all kinds of ways of misappropriating it or just denying it. When we look at our scriptures, and our scriptures say, yeah, like that's God's life in you. That bundle of appetite is this notion of desire to create beauty and goodness in everything that you do, and not to devour it. And so, I think about our current moment with all of, in the middle of this pandemic. And I say middle because like we actually say middle, we don't even actually in some respects don't even know where we are in this pandemic yet. But I think about how so many desires have been exposed, have been revealed, have been opened up to us because, we were kind of covering them over for so long in so many different ways. And then the pandemic shows up and we're all kind of forced into a wilderness against our will. We're forced into a certain fast, if you will, from each other and from all kinds of things. And we discover some things about ourselves. There's these deep longings for connection, so forth. And And I hope that the podcast that this season has spoken to some of those things in helpful ways.
Yeah. Yeah. You introduced in this first chapter, the 4 S's. You want to just talk about those real quick?
Yeah. Speaking of things that never change between the
Yeah.
time you're born and the time you die, this notion that we long to be seen. And, even to this day, so as we record this, so my wife has been away for a few days visiting with our daughter and her husband, and she's going to come back today. And I can't wait. It's not that I just can't wait to see her. Like, I can't wait to be seen by her. It's been a bit of a week that has been less than pleasant for me in a number of different ways, and like to be seen by someone who gets me. And that's going to be a great thing, to be seen in all of the parts of us that not just the parts that I enjoy putting on display, but especially the parts of us that I often hate the most.
Yeah.
That I long to be soothed, especially those parts of me that feel wounded and pained. Of course, I do a lot of work to cover those over and to bury those and to cope with them, because they weren't soothed when I was 4 and 14 and 24. And so I've been doing that all my life, but that doesn't mean that they still don't long to be soothed. We think, well, that happened in the past. There's nothing I can do about that. But still, I'm going to end up burning energy, containing that, protecting that. And that's energy that I then don't have available to create the things that God has been waiting for me to create from before the foundation of the world. So I need to be seen in order to be soothed, in order to create over time and space places of comfort and confidence, this sense of safety, in order for me then to go on and be secure. I'm going to take risks out in the world. I'm going to make mistakes. I might get my knee scraped. I might get hurt. I might have things happen that I don't like, but I am willing to take those proper risks on the mission of creating things. Now, we're not talking about just taking risks in a cavalier fashion. I'm just going to take risks by cheating on my wife. I'm going to take the risk of, cheating on my taxes or whatever it is that I'm going to do. I'm just going to take the risk with my heart by just not exercising. I'm talking about taking the risks that are required to create. And we do that. And when those painful moments come, we have a place to return to where we can once again be seen, soothed, and safe, in order to then go back out and securely create beauty in the world. And so that never stops for us. And one of our main questions is, who are the people who are in your life, even as adults, who are providing that kind of an environment for us on a regularly cadenced basis?
Yeah. And as we get into the second chapter, which is where we start talking about beauty and desire made manifest, we are introduced to one of these confessional groups where people are doing that work. And this whole idea of the confessional communities is really a breeding ground for beauty.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear you just talk again, because I won't forget. I won't soon forget. Now, I might when when my dementia kicks in.
Whatever you're going to say, I hope I haven't forgotten.
Well, I would just love for you to okay. So this now, okay. So there's, I'm going to give you a couple of options.
Okay.
Here's the first option, and you might say, I don't want to do that because I don't know if I can get it all. I'd love to hear you. I would love to hear you. Orate the piece of Wild Things.
Oh man.
Or is that something you can bring up? Because if you can't, that's okay.
Yeah.
But if you can.
Yeah.
I know I'm sorry, I'm putting you on a spot. I should have said this beforehand.
Yeah, I'd need to refresh.
Yeah. Okay. So but let me just say,
when despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and what my children's lives may be, I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax themselves with forethought of grief. I go and lie down where the wood drake lays and the great heron feeds. I lie beside still waters, beneath day blind stars, waiting with their light. And for a moment, I am free.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if that was exact or not.
You know, I got to tell you, uh, it is as much about listening to you utter those words as it is about the words themselves. Like, like I hear you say that poem, and you become the poem. The poem becomes you. Yeah, it's
Mm.
and I and that sense of rhythm and cadence and language all coming into this space of artistic expression is what we long for our lives to be. I want to greet the person at the post office with that. I want to be I want to be Wendell Berry's poetry
Mm.
in a 30-second interchange with somebody at the post office. And we think, well, gosh, come on, that's just way too much to ask for. No, beauty is waiting around every moment in every corner. The other option I was going to give was the moment that you described when you were going for that walk and you crossed over the bridge.
Yeah.
Can you tell us that one?
Yeah. So the reason why, if you've people haven't listened to all of the episodes of the Being Known podcast, we had, I think it was season 1, maybe, and we were really in the lockdown period of the pandemic. And through this practice of you and I and Amy really sort of putting this work into practice
Mm-hmm.
in community and wanting to put myself um, in the line of oncoming beauty,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and having some anxieties about the world and,
Mm-hmm.
as Wendell Berry says in the poem, my life and my kids' lives and
Mm-hmm.
what's going to become of them. Um, I was taking these walks, these sort of gratitude walks, and I had decided that I was going to put this poem to memory
Mm-hmm.
on these walks. And there's a walk that starts at my front door and goes through the neighborhood and ends in this park, really pretty park, where there's the East Fork Creek runs through, of Gunpowder Creek, and there's a bridge at the end of the walk that goes over the creek, and I'm trying to memorize this poem. And as I get to the crest of the bridge, and I'm literally memorizing the idea of the great heron and the wood drake, and the piece of wild things, I look down the creek and I see something stirring in the water, and I realize that it's a great blue heron.
Oh my gosh. I know.
And
Every time I gotta get
fishing
chills
in the
every time you
creek,
tell me this story.
right? And there's something stirring between the heron and me, and I'm thinking, if that's a wood drake, I'm jumping in. It was a mallard, and it was probably stirred by my presence, and it started flew up out of the creek, flew up so low over my head that I could hear his wings flapping over my head. I turned and watched him go down around the bend on the other side, on the other side of the bridge. And I had, to say the least, just goosebumps. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful moment to, and, there was this, as the poem says, this peace that came over me.
Yeah.
In that moment.
Yeah. So we do press into that notion of beauty in that chapter, and then extending into the next chapter, this notion that this is something that is it's inherent not just in who we are developmentally, like little kids who run into your kitchen that they want to show you things that they've made, and that this is what we were made for. But we then go into, I think, the next chapter of really kind of exploring how it is that this is how we were made in God's image. And that process of being curious about what is the next new artifact of beauty and goodness that God is calling us to make is something that is ancient. It comes off the pages of the oldest literature that we have. And it is a thing that we long to grow into and that we long to become at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And out of the following chapter, out of that chapter, we got into the whole idea of becoming the beauty that we create. And then we go into trauma and shame and people of grief. Yeah. And I think this episode really struck a lot of people. I mean, it seemed from all the comments that I saw, it was definitely our most listened to episode, which is telling. And so I'd like you to speak on that.
Well, I think I recently was writing, and I had the honor of writing an endorsement for a book that a friend of mine is writing on trauma, and I in the endorsement I write that trauma is the byword of our age, right? It's just in everything. It's everywhere, and as we talk about in the chapter, trauma isn't just something that shatters us. It equally shatters my capacity to imagine the very nature of what has happened to me, let alone the very nature of then what is possible to move from where I am to where I long to be, because the whole nature of longing itself is ruptured. Longing now becomes associated with great danger. And so to long for things when the trauma of shame and disintegration is waiting around every corner means that I'm taken out of this posture of imagining what is the next new artifact of beauty that I want to create. That just becomes ludicrous. That's insane. And so I think I'm guessing that people found this to be helpful because it's so resonant with where we find ourselves. And the good news is that God is not afraid of trauma. God himself in the Christian story has endured about the worst kind of trauma that anybody could throw at somebody. And God sees a new future in which beauty is always looking to arise from the very worst places we could imagine, an idea in and of itself that we humans could never have come up with.
Yeah. And one of the places where we can nurture that beauty and out of those places that embody shame and trauma is these confessional communities, which was what our 5th episode was about, is really digging into how we tell our stories more truly.
Yeah. And, one thing that I don't know that we said this in that episode that I'll just highlight here. And that is that in many respects, people sometimes will say, well, these confessional communities, you first of all, you got to pay for it because you're going to see 2 therapists, and there are all these rules and regulations. You can't talk to each other outside the group, and that's kind of weird, and all the things. And I understand that. And so at first glance, it feels like these confessional communities are so different from what we might consider to be common everyday life. And yet, as it turns out, with 2 exceptions, there's nothing about what we do in these confessional communities that is any different from what we do in our normal everyday lives. Any interaction that we have, we practice a certain degree of confidentiality. I don't just tell the checkout clerk at Safeway everything about my day. I don't tell them everything. There are certain people I tell certain things to, and other people that I don't tell certain things to. There are boundaries and bridges and all kinds of things that apply in the same way that they apply in these communities. What's different about the communities are 2 things. One, the degree of intentionality that I am practicing on purpose in being in relationship with the people that are in the group. Now, when I say that that's different, I mean, we're practicing in that space, being intentional. And the invitation is for us to be just as intentional in being in relationship outside that group, but the group gives us an opportunity to practice being in relationship fully on purpose. And the second way that we were different is the degree to which we are aware of the processes and the depths of those processes that are taking place at any given time. You may be telling me something, but behind what you're telling me is, you're talking to me, but I know it's your dad who's standing in the room next to us having this conversation. A lot of times we're not paying attention to those kinds of things, but these communities help us practice becoming more fully aware of the depth of processes that are taking place in any domain that we have interpersonal relationships.
Yeah. So that takes us to chapter 6, which was imagine that, looking at what we don't yet see.
Yeah. This notion, again, we've mentioned this before, that there's nothing that we do that does not require imagination. Some of our imaginative processes are the same ones that we've practiced for a while, but we still have to imagine it. I'm going to walk across the floor and the floor is going to hold. But some of them, like, are you going to ask that girl out on a date? Are you going to end that job? Are you going to set a limit with your parent or with your child or with your friend? What are the things that we're going to do? We talked in the last episode about Andrew having to imagine something on Francine's behalf in order for Francine's imagination to catch up. So much of the work of these confessional communities and of what it means for us to create beauty and goodness in the world requires us to imagine things that are out beyond our current capacity to do so. And that's why we need other people's brains in the room to help us do that.
We were talking in the last episode, I don't know if we were talking off camera or on, but and we were talking about how, this podcast itself, that Amy imagined it before we did.
Yeah.
And you and I couldn't quite imagine it until she finally's like, look,
that's right,
jokers.
I know.
Yeah. So
I know.
it takes that community, and sometimes we can't see it for ourselves, and other people have to see it first for us.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right. So then out of that, we get to the chapter on dwell. And this is where we start delving into Psalm 27:4.
Yeah.
And the question of where am I?
Right.
And with who do I live? Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that we don't have all the time to dwell on these things as deeply as we'd like in this session, but
right.
There's the episode that we have, and I'm just, my awareness is just heightened as to how quickly we move from thing to thing to thing to thing, and how difficult it is for us to dwell. And just to encourage people that I just want to say, it's hard to dwell. It's hard to do that. It's hard to be to remain in the room, given our penchant for being distracted, but also given how hard it is for us to sit with things that are painful in our lives. It's hard to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, but it's necessary if change is going to take place in order for me to develop a sense of courage to then do the next hard thing of beautiful creativity. I'm going to need to know that I can dwell someplace where I can return when things get difficult.
Yeah. And after you dwell, you have to gaze. And the thing that one of the things that I really highlighted out of this chapter was this idea of healing requiring perseverance, and just this picture of the 2 millimeters
per day.
A day, right?
Yeah. And that, again, that gazing is not glancing. It is gazing, and I have to dwell in order to gaze. To gaze. I mean, sometimes it's just as difficult. If you see an embarrassing situation, it's hard for me to gaze at that as much as it's difficult for me to allow you to gaze upon parts of me that are difficult. And I, you and we've talked frequently, and others have heard us share how you and I have had opportunities to gaze upon parts of each other that we, that are just not, we don't think they're very pretty. And that very act being acts of healing.
Yeah.
Opportunities for me to be able to know that, oh gosh, like Pepper's holding something that I now am not holding by myself.
Yeah. And
so I can breathe more easily. And I don't have to burn all that energy by myself to contain all that.
Yeah.
And
yeah. And then after we gaze, we inquire.
Right.
right? This is where we learned about William and Ella, and go back and listen to that story because it's really something, right? And
Yeah.
we asked the 4 questions: who are you? What do you want? Can you drink the cup? And do you love me?
Hmm. And I think in many respects they're kind of like self-explanatory, and there's
Yep.
not a lot that we have to say about that, other than again once again to acknowledge that these are not questions that we only answer once. We are repeating and asking and answering these questions repeatedly over and over and over and over again. And especially as we then get to the last chapter of the book, we're really pursuing this question of like, this is what it means for us to ask these questions as a form of us giving an account.
Yeah. Yep.
Of
And we
who
are
we are.
practicing for heaven. And that's what's happening in these groups.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's in these confessional communities that we experience this opportunity for us to dwell, to gaze, and to inquire long enough for us to experience healing from trauma, and to, as we like to say, giving my imagination time to catch up with yours as you are imagining things for me that I can't quite yet imagine. Not just because I'm not smart enough, because I'm too afraid and too ashamed to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And in many respects, we see that the Holy Trinity gives us a model for this, that God never runs out of options, primarily because he never runs out of presence. And by that, I don't mean presents.
Right.
I mean, he
Right.
never, like, there's, as long as I am with you, even to the end of the age, we have everything we need. And no suffering, as much as it can be painful, is always going to be mitigated, not just because I have a solution to the suffering, but because I have presence of others in the middle of the suffering that I encounter.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just, the idea of, and I've thought about this with our relationship of, taking you with me and feeling that presence has been a blessing. And well, I will say, Dr. Desire, you knocked it out with this book. I mean,
McGillicuddy.
But seriously, it's a beautiful book. And it's just been so great going through it with you. I mean, what a pleasure, right? I mean, and learning more from it. I feel like I'm growing through this process, of this podcast. And
I certainly am. Yeah. So I'm, okay. All right.
You had a look on your face. You were going somewhere. Don't tell me you weren't.
I was tempted. But I'm working on temptation.
Yeah. Well, good.
I'm working on temptation.
So I do want to say that as we wrap this season, be on the lookout, because season 4 is slated to begin on March the 2nd. We're really excited about it. You are going to love what we're bringing to you. And once we figure out what that is, I love you, Kurt.
Oh man,
so
love
much.
you too, brother. All right, man.
So when you were talking about, I can't wait to see Phyllis, but the truth is, you can't wait for her to see you. And I thought, because we all say that, right? I can't wait to see you. But the truth is, I really can't wait to see you see me.
Like, right on. That's it. That is it. That is it.
Yeah.
That is it.
And then the other, wait, were you going to say something? Most beautiful.
I was. Yeah. Well, go ahead. No, go ahead, Pep.
No, I was just going to say that. Do you remember the Cheers theme, the scene from Cheers, where everybody knows your name?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? We all want to go. We all want to go where everybody knows your name, and more than your name. But you come in and they want to see you, right? I mean, that's all. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. No. Right on.
Well, it's the whole. Was it Gary Chapman? Who was it that says, when your kids walk through the door, just go crazy, just like be like so happy that they're there. Yeah. And you'll feel ridiculous doing it, but do it.
Yeah.
And the other thing was, like, I've never thought of being an archaeologist, but like when Kurt, when you said we are a bundle of desire, And that is such a sweet way to put it, rather than we're needy or we're insatiable, but it's like this bundle of desire.
Yeah.
And we get to help.
Yeah. It's how we come packaged. I mean, we come packaged into the world like this. And then we're like forever, like trying to train our kids to like, stop it. Yeah. Stop being a bundle of desire.
Right.
Grow up and, stop being, stop wanting to, stop feeling so deeply. Stop needing to like what,
stop wanting.
What's with all the, Yeah. I mean, Phyllis sometimes says, she's so kind when she says, "Oh, I don't know what it's like to be in your head, but sometimes it must be really hard." Which I said, "Yeah, it is. It is." And that's the thing, right? It can be hard, and then you're not very proud of it. You're thinking like, "Yeah, if I weren't so needy, if I had my stuff together, then this would be different. I would feel pleasant and be pleasant to everyone all the time. And that I am not, and that I feel things. There must be something."
Right. I'm not in the place I want to be, because if I was in the place I wanted to be, I wouldn't have these feelings.
Right. Yeah. Right.
What else you got, Aim? You have something else?
Nope, that was it. Oh, I do want you to recite, Kurt. I want you to recite the piece of Wild Things to the postman, and then report back. Didn't you say I got the sentence? I
said in the 30-second window that I might have with someone at the postman. That would take longer than 30 seconds. I only get 30 seconds. So it'd be like, and I'm going to give the pauses. So it would be like only 3 words. I'm going to that I am eternally accused of. I'm accused of the pause, right? The pause that I started to practice. I started to practice the pause at Seasons Weekend, and it all began with the transition from one speaker to the next. And I'm sitting in my chair, and Pepper's waiting for me. Like, has he had a stroke?
We could recite the piece of Wild Thing in the
amount of time it was taking me to get up onto the floor.
Which, by the way, I am surprised I pulled that. I was able to get what I got out.
Dude, yeah,
so I haven't thought about it for a while. Haven't thought about it for a while.
No, but it's a tribute to how much the poem owns you.
Yes, for sure.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
It really.
I was completely confident that it was going to happen, because I'm like, this is like, it's not just like this, like that you can do it with this poem, but like these are the things that you do.
Yeah.
Like things are embedded in you, and you bring them forward. It's just beautiful. It's just beautiful. Yeah.
This has been a great season, you guys. I'm
right on.
Already lamenting that we're, have a little gap between recording, but we'll get there.
I know. Yeah.
This podcast is produced by Kurt Thompson, Pepper Sweeney, and myself, Amy Chella. Audio production and editing is by Keaton Simons. Video production and editing is done by Mark Gould. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on social media at BeingKnownPod. If you like this podcast, tell a friend. If you love this podcast, tell everyone you know. And please like, rate, and review wherever you listen. Be well, be known.